1X Developer Podcast.
Rolling.
So this is episode 1 of the 1X Developer. This is episode 1X. 1X1.
1X E1 S1.
Yeah, SO1 EO1 of the 1X Developer Podcast.
Yeah.
With your hosts Colin and Brendan.
Yeah. We're going to talk about The Art Thief, which I have not read, but Colin has read and had a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's very good. I just remembered it's categorized as true crime, which is interesting because I typically tell people that I hate true crime. I don't know if you know this about me, but when I'm watching, I can watch some true crime, or I can read some true crime, when it's not like, hey, check out these guys who got murdered, isn't that cool? That's what freaks me out, you know?
It freaks you out that people kind of like fetishize that and get really into like the gruesome details of the murder.
Yeah, it feels exploitative to me when... Okay, so my wife and I recently watched one about O.J. Simpson, and they were showing the photos of Nicole Brown, I guess her name is, with, like, I don't know if I want to say on the podcast, like, her head almost off her body.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a person whose family could be watching this. Like, anyway, this book is not like that. This is about a guy who steals art.
That's an interesting tangent, though. Like, true crime has a connotation to it, and it has some baggage to it that, yeah, it sounds like this book is not that, even though it technically is true crime. Right?
It's crime that really happened. So I guess I'll just start with what the book's about. So, oh man, I should have practiced this first. I don't know how to say the guy's name.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's Stefan Breitweiser. But okay, so here's what messes me up. Breitweiser. I know that in German, when you have like an E and an I, it takes the sound of the second one. So the bright is EI, and then the wiser is IE. So if it was German, which it's not, it would be Breitweiser.
He's not German, you're saying?
No, he's French.
Oh, okay.
So I don't even know. Honestly, when it comes to French, there's just like letters that are just there. Like you don't even know. It's probably like Stefan Brit.
That's a controversial take. You should not say that in public.
I apologize to all of our French listeners. I don't know how to read.
I go with, Breitweiser.
Breitweiser sounds the best.
Yeah.
It's Stefan, right? That would be Stefan.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and
really, I don't feel too bad because most of the stuff written about the guy is really negative. This book is probably a bit more forgiving than, from what I've heard, like other articles given. So the Art Thief, I gotta shout out Michael Finkel for writing it. It's about this guy who lived in France and was mostly unemployed. He worked a few odd jobs and stuff. And he lived with his girlfriend in his mom's house in the, like, upstairs. I don't think it's really like an attic, but it's kind of like a separate part of the house, the way I understand it. And he and his girlfriend were, big into art. And they would go to museums and just pick stuff up and walk out. And that's basically how they did all their crimes. Like, it wasn't some Ocean's 11, like... There was no like dynamite or anything involved. Literally, he would pick something and just either like open the display case with his pocket knife or just take it off and just grab it and put it under his shirt or in his pants and just walk out.
So my first question is, what era are we talking about here? Were there cameras around?
So it's mostly the late 90s, I think, is when most of this was happening. let's say his art thefts between 1995 and 2001. Yeah. So like security cameras were a thing. And so they talk about this in the book. So he would mostly go to smaller museums. And so a big part of it is like his selection process for what he would steal. So probably the weirdest thing about this guy is he would steal the art and just keep it in his house. He didn't sell it. He didn't like even tell anyone about it. He just had it. And so there was two things, right? Like he would only steal stuff that he legitimately liked, right? Because it was all just for him. And he would never steal anything that was like too popular. Right. So
not stealing Monet's water lilies.
Yeah. He's taking smaller stuff that normally doesn't have cameras pointed at it, doesn't have a lot of security guards looking at it, doesn't have a lot of people looking at it.
Okay. They can't watch every corner of the museum all the time, at least in those days. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And it also goes into him just being like really freaking good at this. Like he's just... and so his girlfriend they had like a process. His girlfriend would kind of stand watch and have like a little signal that they had set up while he would kind of do the thing of just like nonchalantly slipping this thing into his pants or whatever. And another really crazy thing is he would steal all kinds of stuff. It wasn't just art. He would steal like one of the first things is a crossbow, like this crossbow from like the 1600s or something. He had like a flintlock pistol, lockets, goblets, cups, silverware, like all kinds of stuff. It's crazy when they catch the guy, because they did catch him. He had like they said like millions of dollars worth of just stuff in this room, and he's got like I think he had like a Rembrandt in there. Like it's just ridiculous. He's got like this incredible art collection, and it's stuff he just picked up.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah, and he was doing it like every weekend too. They would go to like, they would drive to Switzerland, hit this place. The next weekend, go to somewhere Germany, somewhere, hit that.
I mean, that makes it even weirder to me, honestly. That he's like crossing country lines. These are now international crimes.
Yeah.
That he's just like, I don't know. Oh, that's just a Rembrandt in the back of my car as he's like going through customs or whatever.
Well, that's
maybe in Europe you don't have to do that.
Yeah, well, and that's part of it actually, is that because they each have like their own police, that's why they didn't connect that like, oh, there's one guy hitting all these, right?
Yeah.
Because like, the police force in Switzerland, which is where he gets caught, they're like, there was a guy who did this 5 years ago. They're not really putting the pieces together that like there's this guy with an MO, which he does have an MO, right? He slips one thing out, or maybe two things. And yeah, so it's really interesting because it gets a lot into like his psyche too. Like there was a lot of psychologists that they interviewed and stuff after he got caught. And one of them was saying that he's not a kleptomaniac. A kleptomaniac is someone who they get off by stealing, which this guy doesn't have. He doesn't steal anything that he's not interested in. He only steals art he's interested in. And he really gets obsessed with a piece and like steals that, right? Like it's not just, he wouldn't steal random stuff, which is what a kleptomaniac usually does.
He doesn't show up to the museum one day and just pick a piece and say like, I'm going to steal that today. He is researching it beforehand. He has a piece in mind. He goes to a specific museum to steal a specific piece on a specific day.
Sometimes. He does actually go in there sometimes and just grab something.
See, that seems klepto, right?
But it's like, it's only something that he wanted. And it's not, at least from the interviews with him and stuff, it wasn't the act of stealing that he was interested in. He wanted that thing.
He was into the art.
And he describes himself as basically just being an art collector who just doesn't pay for stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot there. I don't want to spoil like the whole book. It gets really interesting in like the trial and stuff. But I find the guy really fascinating, and it really made me think a lot about cybersecurity, because kind of like what you were saying, like when you first hear this story, you're like, okay, how? Right? Like how like you can't just do that, right?
Yeah.
You can't just walk around just picking up expensive art and walking away with it. But he did. And they talk about this a little bit in the book. And this is where I think about cybersecurity, is that a lot of it just has to do with the fact that economically, as a museum, you're not really like that incentivized to keep things secure. You kind of are, but not really. Most of the stuff is insured, right? So you're kind of financially protected there. And, you know, when it comes to like getting people to your museum, you know, is it worth another security guard, or is it more worth, you know, starting this new exhibit, getting this this thing here, you know, expanding this thing, which, you know, most museums don't have a whole lot of money, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only the like huge museums that have probably not the smaller places that he was hitting.
Yeah. So there's that element, which makes me think of cybersecurity, right? Like that's huge, right? Like I think that's how cybersecurity incidents happen. Is that, you know, am I economically incentivized to secure all this personally identifiable information? Maybe nowadays you are, because, you know, you can lose a lot of money over this. Depends on your business.
Yeah, I think it depends.
But, you know, it depends a lot on your business, really. But probably I'm more interested in adding new features or fixing bugs or doing things that my customers really want.
Yeah.
So there's that. Also, it was interesting to me, like, well, so another part of it is just the fact that in Europe, there's just like incredible historic stuff everywhere. Like this might be hard for us to understand in Missouri. Like you go to a museum around here and you might see like one or two famous pieces in there. Like the vibe I get is that like in France, you go to a small town, you go to their local museum, which is just a house, and there's this like thousands of years old goblet that they just kind of have on the thing, and you know, like
yeah. Castles lying around the place. Everyone's got a castle. It's like
yeah, the first one he hits is a castle. It's just like a family. Somebody's. It's like I think the family even still owns the castle. They just have it open for people to look at.
Yeah, that is very hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, so I think that's a little part of it. It's just that like it doesn't seem as valuable to them, I guess, or I don't know. They're not thinking about it that way.
Have you ever heard that Eddie Izzard joke where he's talking about like taking a tour of somewhere in America, like in the Northeast, and he's like takes this tour and there's like, these buildings are 200 years old, and he's like, what are you talking about?
No. But it's weird. It's weird when you live in a country that's 200 something years old.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very weird. And I think that, I don't know. I've never spent a lot of time in Europe. I would like to, but I think that would be a very different, I mean, I think that really is a different mentality and a different way to grow up about like, oh yeah, a lot of people just have like old relics in their house that are 500 years old.
Yeah. I think it gets even weirder in China. I think they've got like stuff that's just, yeah, this has been here since before Jesus.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is something when I went to Milan, we got to see The Last Supper. And The Last Supper is it's super reverent. Like it's actually in the original building, still like on the wall it was painted on. And it's all like climate controlled. So like only so many people can go in there at a time and like all this stuff. But I found it interesting how like outside, like right outside, there's like, I guess there's a school nearby and there's these kids like playing soccer in the street and they're huge assholes and they just like are completely have no regard for any of the tourists around. And it just seems like, I don't know, I got that vibe that it's like, okay, this like 5-year-old kid is here playing soccer. And in that building over there is like one of the most famous paintings on earth.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even register that, you know? Like, there are people that would travel across the whole globe to go see this. You know? It's just, I don't know, it's interesting to think about.
It is. You remember, speaking of like the ease of access to some of this stuff, do you remember that story from, 10 years ago where the woman just like tried to fix that fading fresco of Jesus and like Just
Oh yeah, and it looks
smeared all
like
over the place.
it looks weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because she was just able to like walk up and say, "Oh, that doesn't look right. I'm gonna try to fix that." It's like there was no security, there was no nothing like guarding this thing. It was just I don't know, it was just there and it didn't look good, so she tried to fix it.
Yeah. So probably the closest like cybersecurity angle I saw was he was talking about how the author was talking about how like a museum in and of itself is almost anti-security. Like if you wanted to keep this painting super secure, you would just lock it in the basement and never let anyone see it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's kind of a philosophical argument of like, you know, is it even art at that point?
Right.
You know?
If you're not sharing it out into the world.
Yeah. If no one sees it, like what even is it? And that makes me think of like, you ever heard like the CIA of security? It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So that's like a big cybersecurity concept they teach. Confidentiality being obviously keeping it secret, keeping the secret stuff secret. Integrity being like ensuring that the data hasn't been tampered with, and that it's not messed up, not corrupted, whatever. And then availability, which I think a lot of people forget about in cybersecurity, which is that people can actually use this data.
Right. It doesn't do anybody any good if you can't if you lock it behind a firewall and nobody's able to access it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, the best way for, say, Meta to keep all their Facebook data secure is to shut down Facebook.
Right.
Which would be pointless. And that's kind of the same idea. When you have this website with stuff available, you're kind of inviting attacks, but you kind of have to do that to an extent.
Yeah. It's always a balancing act between if you want to make this stuff available, if you want to provide any kind of service of any kind, or make it available to anybody, you're going to have to do this balancing act of security versus availability.
Yeah. And I find, so I kind of think Brightweiser is a little bit like full of BS, kind of, because like in the interviews and in like the court case and stuff, he would adamantly go on about how he was like liberating this art. Like, oh, well, it was stuck in this place where no one was really appreciating it, and I would take it home and appreciate it in a way that other people couldn't. And he, there's a lot about like, so he would take a statue and he would have it in his house and he would touch it, and he would like be eating a snack and like, and he felt that was like the way to appreciate art. Which in a sense I understand, but in the other sense it's like, okay, but you're destroying it, right? That you're not supposed to touch art because the oils in your hand will degrade it, and so you're robbing other people of this enjoyment.
Right, that's what it seems like. It's available to one person now instead of available to all of the people, and that's kind of the point of a museum, right? We take something. It's not that it was available to nobody before, but and the museum makes it available to more people, and more people can come to the museum and see the thing.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like, so I don't buy these things that he's saying, but a lot of them, when he gets kind of, I don't know, what's the word, like grandiose, I guess, when he's describing these things in these like idealistic terms, it kind of makes me think of a lot of like hacker culture, a lot of, kind of gray hat, white hat hackers, they steal this thing and then they do it just for the fun of it, or they do it just to like let people know that this can be done, which isn't what he was doing, but it feels almost ethically in the same vein. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I know what you mean by that. I almost feel like the equivalent in the hacker world would be, well, I almost feel like the equivalent in the art thief world of that kind of white hat hacking would be, I bring it to my house. Well, let me ask this first before I say that. What when he says he's liberating it from something, what constraints is the museum placing on it that that he objects to. If people can't see it after 5 p.m., do people have to pay a like unreasonable admission to the museum? Do people have to see it behind glass and they only can go in for 5 minutes at a time? Like, what kinds of things was he really objecting to?
He says those things, all those things that you just mentioned.
Okay.
The fact that a piece that he has in his house he can see all night from his bed and like lounge around and absorb over time. He also, I don't remember if it was the author Finkel or if it was Breitweiser himself who mentions this, but at some point it talks about like just how annoying guided tours are when you're in a museum. It's pretty legit.
I don't
right?
disagree. Yeah.
He talks about people with audio, like these little audio things they're listening to, and they're not even really paying attention. They don't, and you have that guy right next to you while you're trying to look at this thing that to him is just this most. He describes it as being almost like orgasmic, like these pieces that speak to him. But you do see later in the book that there's definitely like an ego aspect to it.
I mean, even just from that, it seems like, these people aren't enjoying art in the right way. Like, they're not enjoying it the way that I would. You remember that old Simpsons thing about, like, the kids aren't appreciating it in the way that it needs to be appreciated? And, I think that there's something very egotistical and kind of self-centered about the only way for this art to be enjoyed properly is for me to enjoy it alone in my bedroom.
Yeah.
There's something very kind of like self-centered about that.
There's definitely a narcissism to it. But it also kind of makes me think about, there are a lot of like internet piracy people who like just completely hoard stuff. Have you ever seen, like, there are people who will just like download just like every movie.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And they just have like terabytes and terabytes of this stuff.
I've seen Plex servers, where it's like, man, how do you watch all these? They don't watch them all. They just download them constantly.
And I think there's a little bit of an element of like, I have this collection, like they're like art collect, like they think of it as like their collection, The difference being, and I'd be interested in digging into this a little bit. Like the obvious difference there is that when I pirate something, I'm not robbing anyone else of their ability to experience this thing.
Exactly, yeah.
If I'm torrenting it, I'm helping other people steal it too when I seed. So, I don't know, have you read any of the piracy, advocacy stuff? Like, where do you stand on any of that?
No, I haven't really read any formal stuff about that, at least not in a lot of years. I'm not really familiar with what their position is.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's different groups, and I don't know what all of them are all about, but the big thing I see is just that, like, you remember that old thing that's like, you wouldn't download a car.
You wouldn't download a car, right. Yeah, exactly.
But, like, I think I would. Right?
If the other person got to keep the car?
Exactly.
Yeah, I that's why that ad made no sense, and it didn't at the time, and it still doesn't to this day. It's like, if the other person got to keep the car, and I got to have a car... Then,
if I can make an exact copy of my car that you also want and give it to you, I would do that.
Yeah. I mean, the only...
So anyway, that's been the 1X Developer Podcast.
We solved it. We solved intellectual property. I mean, that's the only question in that scenario is the question of, like, of intellectual property, and how do we prevent... How do we promote the arts if people can't make a living off the arts, right? And if someone can if I make a song and then someone can come along and say, this is the exact same song, I made this song. Like, I understand that that's kind of where intellectual property stuff comes from. But I would say in general, I lean towards, sharing. I think it... Downloading movies and stuff helps more people get into movies, helps more people become fans of music and movies. I'm a big fan. Yeah,
and that's what like the piracy advocacy groups argue, is that companies aren't actually losing money when people pirate stuff. And I don't know, I mean, I think it depends. Like, I will say, allegedly, hypothetically, if I were to download some music from a band that I'd never heard before that I wasn't going to buy because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, and then I got really into and I went to their show and I bought all their merch, that they're actually making money from the piracy.
Yeah.
But there is a question of, would I have bought this movie if I couldn't pirate it for free? Is someone losing money? Maybe some. It's kind of impossible to quantify, really.
I think it is. I think it's really hard to quantify. And like I said, I think that's what it really comes down to for me, is that I make art of various kinds. I do think it's somewhat unethical. There is an unethical area there where someone, in theory, could just take my exact same art, say, put their name on it, say, I made this, upload it to Spotify. And I do think there's something wrong with that. And I think that, I think the question is, how much do we need to really regulate that? How much does the government need to get involved in that? But I think that that part is wrong. And I think that most of the problems that we're talking about here kind of expand from that,
Yeah.
I watched a recent interview where this guy was talking about, these things that come and go in the music industry, and how every new technology that comes along provides new routes for piracy and all that stuff. And that in general, being able to share music more easily makes more music fans, makes more... I think that those fans tend to buy more music if they get an album for free and they weren't going to pay for any of that stuff anyway. I don't think there's any loss there. You know what I mean? It's if I download an album and I'm not interested enough in it to go buy vinyl or go to a show or buy some merch, I wasn't going to do anything with it anyway. You know what I mean? I just don't think there's anything is lost there. But yeah, I do think there's a place for IP rights, but I generally side with the side that says no, sharing art is good. The more people that hear art is good. We do need to protect somewhat the ability for an artist to say, this is mine, I made this, someone else can't claim this exact piece of my art as their own.
Yeah.
Sampling, I'm a huge fan. Sample all the things, remix all the things.
Yeah. I remember I got in a Twitter argument once, which I rarely do, but somebody was saying that they were arguing that piracy is actually better than using streaming services because somehow, because Spotify, basically their argument was that Spotify pays such a small amount that it's basically, you might as well just download it for free.
Right. Yeah, I don't think many artists except Drake are making a living off streaming.
And that basically, it's worse for you to be supporting these platforms rather than to just pirate the stuff and then, support them in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like it's probably good that they're getting 0.0001% of a cent when I listen.
Yeah.
I don't know. What streaming has really shown is that people will do what's convenient.
Right. Exactly.
Piracy was more convenient than going to the store or buying something. And generally, streaming has been more easy than piracy. I know there's been a few people that are, a subset of people that are okay, with the fragmentation that we've gotten from all this, all these different services, mostly with TV and music, right? Or TV and movies, where it's okay, I gotta subscribe to Netflix to watch this one show, and I gotta subscribe to Max to watch this one show. That some people are arguing that it's better to just pirate at this point, but I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to think that even if artists aren't making a living off it, I don't know, maybe they get some money from streaming. It's better than no money, but I don't know. I do get that argument. I don't think that Spotify especially is a tenable... Are we allowed to badmouth Spotify if we put our podcast on Spotify?
Oh, dang. I don't know, man. I want that Joe Rogan deal for $350 million.
Right.
We could just censor out every time we say Spotify.
Something tells me Spotify doesn't listen to every podcast posted on the platform, right?
No way.
I mean,
but there was a kerfuffle about that actually. Supposedly, when the Spotify deal happened with Joe Rogan, like some of the episodes were edited a little bit. But I mean, I don't know what they were talking about. Okay. Probably not bad mouthing Spotify. Probably saying words that I shouldn't say.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that was about something else. Joe Rogan. Yeah. Anyway, all that's to say, I generally am on the side of like, let's share more music. Something tells me that this idea that like pirating it is better than streaming it is a little bit self-serving. It's just like you said, it's like, I don't know. That almost seems to me like people just want to. They're justifying their own bad behavior, right? Because you are stealing it, in a way.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that I think Bri Weiser was onto something. I think we should all just steal all the art we want.
Really?
Yeah.
If I come to your house, are you going to have a room full of art?
I can neither confirm nor deny that on record. On record. Yeah, obviously, that's a whole different thing when it's a physical thing that you're stealing from someone else.
Right. Let's get back to that for a sec, because you're drawing a parallel here between cybersecurity and art theft, but like I do think, I mean, the rules of everything change when you're talking about a physical versus digital domain.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think back to, so when I was teaching that cybersecurity course, I always use this example of the castle, and kind of how one thing that I stressed a lot was just the fact that there's really no such thing as a 100% secure anything, ever. Like, in theory, right? There's never something that is 100% secure. Like, you build a castle, and you build a moat around it, you build 2 layers of walls around it, you have mounted sentries, you've got Godzilla roaming, you've got drones, you've got it completely locked down. There's still theoretically a way to get in. And generally speaking, the way to get in is insider threats, like human mistakes, right?
Right.
That was something that I always drew to, and I think that just the concept of the art thief and what happens in the book is similar to that, because it's not that like the museums were insecure generally. They were not as secure as they should have been, and like they could have been more secure, but they never really would have been secure enough. And I think really what most museums are doing is they're trying to take an action of deterrence, right? Mm-hmm. And which worked a lot of the time, right? He would. There are cases in throughout the book where he says, "I really want that piece," and the girlfriend, who is a little bit more level-headed, she would say, like, "No, we're not doing that. Like, there's too many people looking at this. We're not doing that." And it's kind of the smile you're on camera sign kind of thing, right? It's like that's so effective, and I just think it makes a good like theoretical idea, right? Like conceptually, it's similar in the sense that like, look, I'm never going to lock down my museum all the way to where no one can ever steal anything, but there's a kind of like when you talk about like pricing in economics, how there's like a demand and price like overlap, right, in the graphs. It's like there's a deterrence level that will keep people from like trying to steal your stuff, right?
Yeah, most people.
Yeah, and that too, because just like with price, some people will pay a lot for something, some people will take more risk than other people.
Yeah,
but ideally there's a minimum level of deterrence to prevent most attacks, and that's where you want to be, because you don't want to be overpaying for, you don't want your data that. If you've got data that nobody really cares about, you don't need like to be spending all this money, on data that doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah. I think, well, okay, so many things. I think we need to reconsider the idea of data that nobody cares about. Like,
okay, yeah.
I think that our personal data like there are pieces of data that would seem by today's standards, people would be like, oh yeah, that needs to be secured and locked up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Birth dates, social security numbers, that like, I used to work at companies and they would just like pass around social security numbers. Like it's no big deal. And nowadays that's like a really big deal. I think with that stuff that we always need to err on the side of locking personal information down and not, and there being huge fines for violation of that, for one thing.
That's true, yeah, and it's interesting to think about because the fines, I think, is the important thing to focus on, because like if every business is only thinking about their bottom line, then what data is important changes a lot.
Yeah.
But we have pretty good laws, I think, about PII and PHI, and there's another one, financial PFI. Is that right?
You also school me on that. I don't know.
Something like PII is personal identifiable information. PHI is personal health information, and there's another one that's like personal finance information or something.
That's like credit card numbers and stuff?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. Like, I think we've got those things mostly down for like, hey, you gotta keep these secure to a pretty good degree.
I think most of, like when I see that Equifax was breached, I think they need to be like punished until they're driven out of business.
Yeah.
I really think that a data breach at a company that is whose job is collecting personal information, like I think that needs to be almost the end of your company. I think the fine for that should be so incredibly high.
I think that's fair.
I think we need to, that's the equivalent of like hiring 300% more security guards at your museum even though you don't think you need them. I just feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the museum equivalent here, right? Like this would be the museum that you don't think you have any art that's worthwhile, but for the right people, it's worth a lot, and they'll do a lot to get it. I don't know. I'm losing the metaphor here.
I think I get, because they do get into. I think it was the piece that got him caught, which I don't remember what it was, but they do get into how some of the pieces he took were like considered like national treasures. Like they were like, it wasn't just like this famous art. It was like this critical piece of what it means to this nation, right? So like. I think that, something like that has a level of it that's deeper than just the... I mean, at the end of the day, he's stealing oil paint and canvas. Right? And that's not what he's stealing, though. He's stealing the history, the beauty, and... it's all kind of subjective, and everybody would have different ideas of, But I think a lot of people would say that, like, stealing the Liberty Bell does more to like an American than stealing, I don't know, a painting, some famous American painting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're onto something there. Yeah, like it's, and I think it I guess it would come down to the government to say like, look, personal information, that's a big freaking deal.
Yeah. I think it has to be the government. Yeah. They have to be the ones who decide that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the question of like how much security is enough security or is too much is an interesting one, because I mean, you're right. Whether it's physical, whether it's just going back for a sec to the idea that it's always a human failing. Did you ever read that book Cyberpunk about like Kevin Mitnick? And
no.
It's like an old, I want to say it's from the 80s, but like the way that he does everything is social engineering.
Right.
I mean, obviously he was a smart guy. He knew a lot about computers, but so much of it was just him calling up in those days he would call up a security guard and be like, pretend to be someone else. And it was always like a weak link in the chain was like just some guy who was given access. And I think that cybersecurity has not changed that much in that there are a lot of people who have access to things that they probably don't need, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Those are the weak links in the chain. Is if you're trying to get into something, you want to find, like, how many of these breaches have been an employee's email account was breached, and now the hacker has access to everything.
Yeah. Do you remember the fappening?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember, I guess they caught the guy, but I remember reading somewhere that they said that was all social engineering. It was a lot of, I think, mostly guessing security questions.
Really?
Yeah, like, what school did you go to? Go to Scarlett Johansson's Wikipedia page. Oh, she went to that school. That's a security question. A lot of that, I think.
I never realized. Oh, sorry. I never realized. I never knew where that came from.
Yeah, and I mean, he had like tons of stuff, like tons of different stuff from different accounts.
That's why I thought the thing was that they speculated it was like an iCloud breach, but
oh no, yeah, there was something with that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, it was more than just that, I think.
I mean, have you ever seen those things? I can't believe people still do them, but like on Facebook, your ghost name is your month and the day you were born.
Yeah.
And you post, my name is Boo Bob or whatever, and like they're able to figure out your birthday from that and just go backwards. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, it seems like a lot of work to compromise one Facebook account, but at the same time, I don't know, maybe it's not that much work.
Well, what else is on your mind? I mean, is there anything else about art, stealing art, piracy? I feel like we almost need to just do an episode on piracy.
Yeah. Okay, here's something that's been on my mind about this stuff that kind of ties into this. You heard about this recent XZ hack?
Yeah.
And so it was only caught by, this one guy who noticed his logins were taking 0.05 milliseconds long, and he dug into it. I mean, that I think is a perfect example of what we're talking about. What's a reasonable level of security? If you have somebody, so maybe I should just explain what I know about this and where I'm coming from. So my understanding is that there was a bad actor who infiltrated this XZ project, which is like a low-level utility kind of thing. It's not something that people would expect to have a hack in it. It's kind of just a low-level thing that...
It's the type of thing that you see, like, you're having some weird bug, and then someone on Stack Overflow says you need to update this thing you've never heard of. Yeah. That's the type of thing it is.
Right. And so there was this bad actor who got involved in this open source project, and he was involved for like 2 years.
Years, yeah.
Doing maintenance on this thing.
Doing actual work.
Work. Before he apparently, at some point in recent months, inserted some malicious code to do, I don't know what, call back to some place. And like, I haven't even read anything that definitively says what exactly it was trying to do. But that's the kind of thing that I don't know that you can really guard against that in an open source project. I don't know that you can guard against someone who's willing to put 2 years of their life into like tricking you. And apparently there were other accounts that were like confirming this guy. They're like, yeah, I've worked with that guy, he's good. And pressuring them to accept pull requests and all this kind of stuff. I don't know what level of security could even stop that. Like, at some point you do have to trust people, especially if they've been doing work.
Yeah.
And B, especially for an open source project that's not flush with resources. We're not talking about like the guy running this thing can't vet this guy. He can't like, I don't know, run a background check on him or whatever. That's just not reasonable for any open source project maintainer to do that. That's not corporately sponsored. So I don't know. I thought that was a really good example of like, there's no appropriate level of security that would have prevented that. Everything that would have prevented that, I think, would have been way overkill.
Yeah, I mean, people have to work on it, and it almost like you almost wonder with that specific one, like, was the guy thinking this from the very beginning, or did he change
Yeah.
You know, did he like get this idea at some point? Can I trust myself? Like, you know, like who?
Or did somebody could get to him? Somebody could be like, "Hey, I see you've been contributing to this project. I'll give you $1 million if you insert some malicious code."
Absolutely, that could happen. And I just looked up while you were talking about that. The Fappening, the 2014 celebrity nude photo leak. Apple claimed in a press release that access was gained via spear phishing. So there was, I think that's what it was he was mostly doing. He sending emails like, you know, pretending to be somebody and getting celebrities to click on. I always wonder, like, okay, if I'm famous, okay, there's no nudes of me anyway, because I don't want people to see me naked. And, I mean, I just think, if I'm famous, and I'm, like, famous for being hot, I'm probably not going to take pictures of myself naked and send them to people.
I agree. But they should be able to, right?
Yeah, that's your right to do that. You should totally be able to do that.
These are your private accounts. You should be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't mean to victim blame. That's, yeah, it's messed up what he did, obviously.
I do think that's interesting, though, that, I mean, that just the number of accounts that came out. I don't remember what it was, but it was a lot of people.
A lot, yeah.
That all of those were...
They're like household names, too, you know? Like,
yeah.
It seems like, I don't know. I can't even imagine, like, someone that famous setting up their own iCloud account.
That's what I always wonder. Don't you have, like, an IT staff?
Yeah.
Maybe people don't. I don't know. But I always imagine they have someone who's, like, guarding their accounts 24/7, like LifeLock or whatever.
Yeah. That guy got fired.
Did he? LifeLock like went down the toilet.
No, I mean like whoever they had, that was their IT guy.
Oh, yeah.
If they didn't, but if they did, he's gone.
Yeah. But you get an email and you click on it. Like, I think, especially 10 years ago, maybe a lot of people didn't know to do that.
What do you think is like the dumbest cybersecurity thing you've ever done? I've clicked on stuff that I shouldn't have clicked on for sure. I think the dumbest thing is reusing passwords. I've also had some really bad Well, another thing is like, you know, for me, like the first email account I ever created, I was like 9 years old.
Right.
You know? So it's like, yeah, I think the password was like password or something.
Yeah, that's part of making things easy for people to do the right thing, right? Is that it should be really hard for people to create stupid easy passwords.
Yeah.
And we need to move towards that a little bit. And I think we have, like, you know, two-factor authentication is more normal than it used to be and that kind of stuff. But like, we just need to make it super, super hard for people to do dumb things. Because most people will just do the easy thing, the normal thing.
Yeah. Because they don't want to forget their password. They don't want to reset their password.
Yeah. We have that all the time at work. People are just like, my password expired, so instead of password 1, I'll make it password 2, or whatever.
Yeah. I wonder how much more secure password 2 is than password 1. I mean, like, cracking it would be about the same.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, if you're using, like, a dictionary attack, I feel like password 2 is a lot lower on the list than password 1.
You think so? I
would say it's at least one index further.
I think for a modern GPU brute force attack, I'm going to say negligible.
Yeah,
I think they're probably on the same level.
Yeah.
Tell me about how this guy got caught.
So he got caught multiple times. The first time he got caught, he was just walking out of the Swiss museum with a piece, and somebody saw him and they grabbed him and they were like, "Dude, what the hell are you doing?" And he pretty much got away with it because he said, "This is the first time this has ever happened. Yeah, I saw the piece, I liked it, you know." And he got a fine and some probation, something like that. And then after that, they got really scared. And the girlfriend was really like, "Hey, I'm not into this anymore." Because she was always, like, he was really about this. She was always like, "Yeah, I'll help you do this." But after that, she started making rules like, "Hey, we don't hit the same museum more than once. We're not ever going to do Switzerland again because they fingerprinted him when he got caught in Switzerland. And you're always going to wear gloves. So he goes to Switzerland and doesn't wear gloves. And I think he hits the same museum, actually.
See, that reeks of klepto to me, right?
Well, so he definitely got really, really cocky. And that's what I mean with, like, the ego thing. He got really, like, I'm super good at this. He would do this thing where he would, he had kind of a calling card where he would slip the paintings out of the frame and then he would leave the frame somewhere. Almost as like like he would put the frame somewhere where it's easy to see. Almost as like, look, it's right in your nose kind of thing. So anyway, that's how he really gets caught. And I don't really want to spoil everything because there's like some really interesting twists and turns after that. But he gets caught and he's out of jail now. And okay, we have the Wikipedia up. His penalty was 26 months in prison. And they mention how apparently a lot of, in criminal law with theft, a lot of the punishment is based on how you did what you did. Which sounds weird at first, but, what do they call it? Theft with an armed weapon? Theft with a...
Oh.
You know what I'm saying?
Armed robbery.
Armed robbery, yeah. Armed robbery is way different from just robbery.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he would go in, not even talk to anybody, grab something and walk out. And he also never made any money from any of this stuff, which is another aspect, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of legally, it's like, it feels like what you did should be super illegal. And it is illegal, but it's not like that illegal, really.
Not just a little.
It's illegal. Less. Yeah. It's way less illegal in Europe than you would think it should be. And there was another thing, which is the valuation of what he stole was always in question. Yeah. Because a lot of these things have never even been sold before, right? The museum has just always had it. So it's like, what is this worth? And there's people out there that said he had like $1 billion worth of art, which maybe he did, but it's like, how do you goes back to what we were talking about. He stole pieces of marble. He stole wood panels with oil paint on them. He did steal gold and silver, but, that's not what he stole, right? He stole these works, these historic things.
Yeah. I mean, that's just a problem with the valuation of art, right? I've heard that the Vatican has, like, all of these pieces of art that they value at $1 because they're not planning to sell them or anything. It's not like they're not investment pieces. They're like cultural pieces. They're like
on the books as $1.
I think in the Vatican.
Is it like a tax thing?
I guess so. Yeah. I'm not sure who the Vatican pays taxes to since they're their own state.
Yeah.
But yeah, they value them as far as like the Vatican's net worth. They value them very low, but. Which seems, a little silly, but at the same time, like, yeah, what is the value of any piece of art? It's whatever the market demands, and that's always kind of a weird thing. Yeah. So it's extremely weird to say, well, how much did this guy stole 239 pieces of art? How much money is that? It's like, depends on the day. Like, depends on what any person is willing to pay for them.
So I guess I have to explain this part. There, a lot of the stuff. So okay, I'll just spoilers for the art thief. His mom, who claims to have had no idea he was stealing all this shit, even though he was living in their house, she thought he just came home with art, like he would buy some art or whatever. When he gets arrested, she went into the room and destroyed everything.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, so she went into the woods and burned all the paintings and stuff, and then everything that could, like, survive water was thrown in a river. And they, so they collected all the statues and medallions and stuff out of this river, and all the paintings and stuff were never found.
Oh, shit.
Which also feels like, okay, you have to keep in mind it's Europe, right? I feel like if this happened in the United States, they'd be like, look, you're going to tell us where you burned the shit, or you're going to jail forever. Don't you think? It seems like they should be able to say that.
You don't think they do that in Europe?
Well, they didn't. They don't know where. She says she went into the woods, and she says she entered like a fugue state, basically, and was like scared, and went up there, took all the paintings out, burned it in the woods somewhere, and then threw all the statues and shit into the river. Which is another aspect of it, is that she's pretty old, and there are people who say that there's like no way she moved all of it herself.
Yeah. No, there's a cache of art somewhere.
That's another thing. Some people, because at that point the girlfriend wasn't living, she got her own place. So people say maybe she got it. Some people say that the mom was helped by her boyfriend, which sounded pretty likely. The way it was described in the novel, I guess not novel, but book. But yeah, so there's that aspect of it too. Like they don't even know. I don't know if he even got charged for some of that stuff because it's just gone.
That's wild.
And then the mom got in like even less trouble than him.
The one who actually destroyed the art. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. That kind of speaks to how we value that stuff. It's more of a crime to take it from the museum than it is to destroy it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I do feel for her a little bit. It's like she's just trying to protect her son, but that's crazy. The whole story is crazy. It's a really good book. Everyone should read. Pretty short, and I mean, I don't know. The craziest thing is that the guy. Okay, so then after that, he gets out of jail, and then that's when he starts stealing for money. And the really ironic thing is, he starts stealing for money because he has all these legal fees from when he went to jail for stealing art. And so at that point, he becomes more of what you think of an art thief.
Right. For profit, he's trying to.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me though that that's a much harder thing to do, because like it almost seems like that's what people are on the lookout for, right?
Yeah.
You steal a painting and then you have to move it. Like that's the hard part. Almost like a car, right? You can steal a car, but the hard part is then like you can't just drive it around.
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
just drive around a stolen car. You have to take it to a chop shop and all that stuff. So like if you just steal a painting and put it in your room, maybe no one will be the wiser.
Yeah, and he did then get caught again when he was stealing for profit. I don't know how much of trouble he got in for that, but he's not in jail right now, at least at the time of the writing of the book, which is crazy. But I'd heard about this book somewhere, but I didn't buy it until I was listening to The Red Thread, which is another podcast. I mean, it's not as good as this one, but they did an episode on the Boston Art Museum heist, which is, I think, the biggest art heist in American history, they said. And yeah, these guys busted in and stole a bunch of stuff. Happened before Stefan did his stuff, and that's one of the things they mentioned is that he completely frowned upon that. Right, those guys busted in there. They broke a bunch of stuff. They had like no respect for the art. They cut stuff out of the frames. Oh yeah, which he adamantly would never do. But anyway, I heard that, and then I was like, hey, wasn't there a book about art thieving I was going to read? And I read this. But kind of the guys on the podcast on the Red Thread, they were talking about that. Like, okay, so you steal this, and then what do you do with it? And I ended up doing a little bit of research on it, and really, apparently, that's how most people get caught. Most art thieves, they get caught when they're selling this thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
The thing I've always heard, though, is that most of it, like most stolen art, is used as kind of like collateral for other illegal activities. Which sounds weird, but when you think about it, like, okay, I want to buy like $1 million of cocaine. It's a lot easier for me to give you this Rembrandt than for me to give you actually $1 million, right? For a bunch of illegal stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, the two parties, they're both rich enough that, I don't need liquid $1 million. I'll take that stolen Rembrandt, yeah.
But then what? You keep it for like a few generations before you move it back into the system?
I think the idea is you trade it with somebody else.
Okay.
And that it just keeps going. Another thing they mentioned, I don't know if that was in the book or somewhere else I was reading, that most stolen art gets traded on the black market at like 10% of its actual value. Because it's worth less. Because it's, you can't really sell it, you can't really move it around.
Right. Yeah, what do you do with it if you can't put it back into the public circulation?
Yeah. But there are also art collectors that'll buy stolen art.
Oh, just for their private
collection? Yeah, some. So maybe that's part of the idea too. Like, yeah, I'll give you all this cocaine, you give me that stolen art, and then maybe someday I'll sell it to a guy.
And you walk into some rich dude's house and you're like, oh, and he goes, oh, that's a real Rembrandt.
Yeah. I think that's what happens. The only thing I really know, like, that just reminded me, like, I know that there was this thing, I think it was more in the 90s and 2000s, where fans would, like, steal cells from anime. Like, one still frame would be stolen. And they're still out there. Like, I've seen people, or, like, online and stuff, who have, like, a cell from Evangelion or whatever, which, on the one hand, is, like, super cool. But the fact that almost all of those were stolen is, like, what are you doing, you know? I mean, people are breaking into your favorite creator's workplace to actually do harm to their ability to do their work.
Yeah.
And, you know, weird.
I've seen single cells, not necessarily anime, but like I feel like it was, I don't know, Mickey Mouse or something. Like,
probably,
I've seen single cells for sale. But you're saying most of that stuff is stolen?
Yeah, like, this was a big problem. And I think, it was like the late 90s, early 2000s. But people would, like, sneak into an anime studio, pretend to be, like, a janitor or something, and swipe these cells out of there. I'm sure some of them are legit. Like, they were auctioned off by the creators or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's nuts, you know?
Yeah, that's...
I know they go for sale at, like, conventions and stuff. I don't know. I feel like maybe that's the kind of thing that it's, like, it's small enough that, like, they don't keep an inventory of every single cell. You know, they don't know.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I imagine, like, I think they were stealing them, like, as they were being used, you know?
While they were making the movies?
I would think so. I mean, I don't know where they keep the ones that have been used.
They keep them in the caves here in Missouri.
Yeah.
I've heard they're good for, like, there's all kinds of archive stuff in the caves.
Really? I have no idea what's in... All I know is about the paintball place.
I heard that Disney has cave storage, that all kinds of stuff, like, apparently the caves are very naturally climate controlled and all kinds of stuff, so people will keep film and stuff like that needs to be kept at a specific temperature.
Okay. Where exactly?
Just walk in, grab a handful of cells, and walk out.
Yeah. Nah, I'm sure anything that's valuable is pretty well guarded.
Oh, I'm sure. But, I mean, that's the funny thing about this stuff is, like, we say that. I'm sure it's very well guarded, but, like, is it? Or can you just, like, walk into a museum and take what you want?
I mean, I think part of it is, like, I think there's an element of, like, you know, these people running these museums, there's an element of, like, well, no one's going to walk in here and just grab it and walk out.
Yeah.
Right? No one's that dumb. And I think that's why it works, you know?
That's why they don't think they need enormous amounts of security, is because who's going to come in here and take a crossbow? Like, who's just going to walk out of this place with a crossbow in his pants?
So the crossbow, well, he had multiple ones, but they described the first one he stole, he threw it out the window into a bush, and then went outside and collected it. Because it was in a castle, so I think, I don't even know if they had the windows, like, closed or whatever. But, yeah, he just threw it out the window. Which really, and you know, it's moments like that where it's like, okay, you're not trying to liberate art. You threw it out the damn window.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. I feel like I haven't read the book, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff here that points to, just wanting to get away with it.
Yeah. I feel like this has become less cybersecurity and me just talking about a book I read. But,
well, we've been going for over an hour. Probably time to wrap it up. We're definitely going to cut out some sections. Some sections that won't see the light of day. So, I don't know, trim it down to 45 minutes. And I feel like there's some good stuff in there.
Hope so.
Do we have a sign-off yet? We should have taken our break to come up.
Jeez. I mean, what do people say at the end of the, like, don't forget to like and subscribe? I don't even know what platform we're on, so...
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far. I
don't think we need a catchphrase or anything. I think we can just kind of... Yeah, that's been it. That's been it. See ya.
I think a catchphrase will come organically at some point. And we just need to let it emerge We just need to talk, and at some point, it will bloom from our podcast garden.
We could fade out. Are we fading out right now?
Sure.
One X Developer Podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Colin. First and foremost, I want to thank you all for listening to this episode of the 1X Developer Podcast, and let you know that if you have any questions, comments, or if you just want to tell us about your day, you can reach us at X, formerly known as Twitter, at 1X Developer Podcast. We're also on YouTube at 1X Developer Podcast. You can email us if you're weird at 1xdeveloperpodcast at protonmail.com. And lastly, don't forget to follow, subscribe, all that stuff, so you don't miss any further episodes of the 1X Developer Podcast. Thanks so much. See you next time.